G'day, I'm Paul. Got some exciting news about the Mazda BT-50 and also the Isuzu D-Max. The D-Max has kind of become one of my new favourite utes. It really brings a whole lot of safety features and a whole lot of technology to a segment that's kind of a little bit dated. Both of these utes are going to pick up more power, more torque, plus a factory off-road kit. And all this comes from a reliable source that we've used previously. It's the same source that gave us information on the Bronco getting an EcoBoost V6, which we now know is true. So I trust him or her. You're never going to know. Now, if you haven't done so already, make sure you hit subscribe and also press the bell icon. That's going to tell you every single time we publish a new video, but let's get started. Now, a little bit of a history lesson here. Both the BT-50 and the D-Max share a platform. So instead of the BT-50 now being related to the Ranger, it is very much related to the D-Max. And that means that the BT-50 loses its previous generation 5-cylinder turbocharged diesel engine and now shares that engine with the D-Max, which is a new version of the 4JJ. It's a bit of an iconic motor because it goes on forever and ever. They're very hard to kill, and Isuzu has simply refined it a little bit. It now makes 140 kilowatts of power and 450 newton meters of torque, which is 10 kilowatts and 20 newton meters more than its predecessor. I've tested the D-Max before, and I'm really impressed with it. I've also been up close and personal with the BT-50. So based on the D-Max being good, I assume the BT-50 is going to be good as well. They're both a huge leap forward. Okay, let's move on to the first bit of exclusive information, and it's my understanding that both of these utes are going to come with a factory off-road kit. What does that mean? Well, it's a kit that's going to be endorsed by the factory and fitted by the factory. So when it gets delivered to you, it's fully warranted and covered and ready for you to do some off-road driving. At the moment, the BT-50 range in Australia caps off with the GT, that's the top specification model, and the D-Max range finishes up with the X-Terrain. Now, both of those look like they're good off-road, but they're very much the same as lower models in the range, just with a little bit more styling and accessories. My understanding is that this off-road kit will actually make them better off-road as well. And if you want to picture in your head, think of something like a Ford Ranger Raptor, a Nissan Navara Warrior. We've tested those cars and they're very much standard utes in that sense, but then have a lot more off-road equipment such as better tires, different suspension that increases the ride height and gives you more clearance underneath, and potentially a snorkel as well, which will make driving through water and those types of conditions a little bit easier. I've got some pictures here of what it'll look like as well. What you're looking at on screen there right now is the BT-50 off-road version. I think this looks fantastic. So you can see the big chunky tires there. They kind of look like the BF Goodrich tires fitted to the Ford Ranger Raptor. Big looking alloy wheels as well, and then the big tow hooks on the front. And then if you look at the back, you can see those flared wheel arches with the plastic bolt-ons, and you and I both know that that means this ute is very serious off-road. If I was to take a guess at it, the standard 240mm ground clearance of both of these is probably going to be a little higher. If you look at something like the Ranger Raptor or the Nissan Navara Warrior, they're all up at about the 270mm mark. That just affords you a little bit of extra room. They both also come with extra protection at the front to stop rocks and things like that hitting your engine, and overall that's going to be better for the off-road experience. While the BT-50 looks cool, I reckon the D-Max looks sensational. So these are just artists' renders of what we think these will look like, but same story again, a big set of chunky tires for the D-Max. D-Max, of course, now comes with a standard rear differential lock. Finally, the previous one didn't. So you've also got low range there and also a hill descent control as well. So this will also come with that added ride height. You can see those tow hooks at the front for recovery. It all round looks like a far more impressive vehicle off-road. And I think the rear sums it up as well with that decal on the back that really makes it stand out, and a little less focus on those sailplanes. I know a lot of people aren't huge fans of them. Same with the wheels on the X-Terrain. I think this design really lends itself to this being capable off-road. We know, especially with the D-Max, that a lot of people buy these vehicles to go around Australia, for example, so they need something that is super capable off-road. And it's our understanding that Isuzu is putting a lot of effort into things like dust sealing and also underbody protection to make sure that if you do find yourself on something like the old Telegraph track, this is not going to stop halfway through. Let's move on to the next part, which is extra power and torque. So when this engine was revealed, we're a little disappointed because the standard in the dual cab ute segment at the moment is around the 500 newton meter mark from the 4-cylinder turbocharged diesel engines. So when Isuzu announced that they had released a new version of the 4JJ engine with just 450 newton meters of torque, we're all a bit like, it could do with a little bit more. Obviously, having driven it now, it's more than adequate, and it actually feels a little punchier than 450 Newton meters. We know that when we tested the D-Max recently for our single car review, it spun the wheels off the line when we punched it, and it felt way punchier than the rest of the utes that already have 500 Newton meters. So I reckon they're probably just telling a little porky pie there with the outputs, and it probably already does close to 500 anyways. But our source tells us that these both are going to have a factory fitted power upgrade, and that will be 10% more power and 10% more torque, and that should mean outputs of around 155 kilowatts of power and 500 Newton meters of torque. And that will match the segment leaders, which at the moment are things like the Ford Ranger and also the Toyota Hilux. It is worth keeping in mind that we're not talking here about the V6 diesel options, so your Volkswagen Amarok and that type of thing. We're strictly talking about the 4-cylinder diesel engines. Now, how do we know that this is going to happen? Well, there is a little bit of a secret in the gearbox, and it's possibly thanks to that gearbox that Isuzu was able to extract a little bit more out of it. Now, stick with me here. It's called the Aisin AWR 6B45. It's the second generation of this 6-speed automatic transmission. It came in when Isuzu switched to Euro 5 diesel engines, and they've retained that with this latest generation of the D-Max. Now, this gearbox is also used in the Toyota Hilux. The reason you don't know that it's used in the Toyota Hilux is because Toyota gives it a different name. And this is presumably so people don't really know that it is an Aisin gearbox. Aisin is of course owned 51% by Toyota. So they have a vested interest, and this gearbox is used in the current 8th generation Hilux that makes 500 Newton meters of torque. So the gearbox can handle that torque output, and this is what we understand is going to come to BT-50 and D-Max as a factory option. So you should be able to tick this box, or perhaps they will roll it out with a model upgrade, perhaps midlife, but we do believe this is coming, and that has me excited because I think it's kind of a mental barrier for people. If you go to buy an Isuzu D-Max or a BT-50, and certainly in the case of the BT-50, where the last generation engine produced 470 Newton meters of torque and this one goes backwards, it's kind of this mental hurdle for people not wanting to have something that isn't the best. So they've probably kept this one in their pockets so that they can roll it out, or perhaps charge a little bit extra for it, because I think people will pay if they know that they can extract another 10% out of their engines and have it backed by the factory in terms of warranty. They're going to jump at that opportunity. So this will also set them up for the next generation of the MUX. So it hasn't been announced yet, but we know that the MUX always follows the D-Max, and that will also mean that they can slot that in at 500 Newton meters and give that a little bit more punch, because that is significantly heavier than the D-Max. So you really want to strike that balance between drivability and also feeling that power behind the wheel. So let's see what happens. It shouldn't be too far away. I'm tipping the next 6 to 12 months that we'll hear more about this. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are on this. Has the 450 Newton meters held you back from buying the D-Max or putting your name down for the BT-50? Or do you simply not care? Let me know what you think in the comments section below. If you did enjoy this video, I'd love it if you could hit the like button, follow it up with a subscribe, and also press the bell icon so you can find out every single time we give you some exclusive news and reviews. But until next time, take it easy.